Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Stay Rich podcast with me, your host, Ryan Benson, author of How the Rich Get Divorced and Stay Rich. And introducing my guest today, also an author, a best-selling author, in fact, of a wonderful and fantastic divorce book that I've read. I would certainly recommend you read it too. I Just Want This Done. Author, family lawyer extraordinaire, Raiford Palmer. Welcome to the Stay Rich podcast.
Thanks, Ryan. I really appreciate being on the show today. It's great to be here.
Well, we're very glad to have you today, and I'm so excited to talk to you. I've been waiting for this moment, I feel like, for a long time to get you onto the show because your book is so profound. I mean, there's so much information in there and especially helpful for men and women, but since this podcast is geared towards men, I'll talk about men.
Sure.
For men going through the divorce process and just getting things done. Like, it's key. You don't want to be stuck in a divorce for 10 years, guys.
Right. Absolutely. I'm in the Chicago area, and our court system here can, especially in Cook County, which is where Chicago is located, cases can take 2 to 4+ years to get through trial, which is an extraordinarily long time. And so part of the rationale for the book is to help people save time, money, emotional energy, and get their cases resolved. And so that's been my mission for a long time in my career. And I didn't really there wasn't a book out there that talked about the things I wanted to talk about. I was looking for a resource to give to my clients because I was telling them the same things over and over again that I learned in my experience that wasn't stuff that you could Google online. Mm-hmm. It's similar to your book when you look at it from your perspective and from your experience. You were providing what I've called ungoogleable advice and things that you can't get from ChatGPT or whatever. This is stuff that comes from long experience and wasn't anywhere else in one place. So that's why I put it all together for I Just Want This Done. And it's been out since 2021, still a bestseller.
Yeah, I mean, it's really one of those divorce books that does stand out in the crowd. I mean, there's so many out there that just sort of give platitudes and they give different, kind of small pieces of advice that you've heard 1,000 times before elsewhere. Right. And, that was one of the things that I enjoyed looking and reading through your book is that for once you can get a straight answer out of a lawyer.
That was part of the goal.
And get actual advice by reading something, which is amazing.
Yeah. I wanted to spill the tea. First I want to explain why the system is the way it is. So first of all, everybody, it's common knowledge that people say, well, the system's broken. I mean, you've talked about it, we've talked about it, and whether in Canada, United States, the system doesn't do a wonderful job at resolving these problems. And I explain, why is that the way it is, number one? Why are divorce lawyers the way they are? What are the limitations in the system? So helping people understand how the stage is set and the arena they're dealing with, because your clients and mine, ours, are in an unfamiliar environment. They are successful business people. They have fought and won many battles in their arena, but they've never been in this particular battlefield. And you and I have many, many times. So explaining to them the lay of the land, this is what it looks like, here's why it is this way, helps them make better decisions. And that's the key is I'm looking for that informed consumer. How can I help my client be better informed so they can make great decisions? And that was one of the things I liked about your book was you really have the same mission. It's educating the client or the reader so they can make the best decisions when they're in that situation. And this is something the business person has usually not dealt with before. As I've said to other lawyers in my firm, this is our 1,000th divorce or whatever, however many hundreds or thousands. This is their first for most of them. Mm-hmm. And they don't know these things. These are things we think are common knowledge or we understand. But we have to educate each client one person at a time. And one of our important roles is education. So,
is there some sort of almost like common theme when it comes to dealing with business owners that you face on a day-to-day basis, just in getting them up to speed, right? From their first divorce to sort of getting some sort of almost competency in this field? Like, how do you deal with business owners today?
So one of the things it's important to understand, I think the first thing is the understanding context, and that this, although I make comparisons to business transactions and doing a deal, like this is kind of another deal, similar to things you've said too, understand that this is a form of a transaction or transition, and the things that make sense in a business transaction or preparing for a big business transaction make sense here. Assemble a quality team around you, educate yourself, gather intelligence about the situation, understand the rules of the game, and then make those informed decisions to get your best result. Those rules apply in divorce. So that's a familiar pattern to explain to a business owner, and they get it when you say, hey, you want a good team, so you want somebody who understands the finances, you want a good lawyer, probably want a mental health professional to help you with counseling about communications and how to understand why your spouse is saying the things they say, how to talk to your kids about this stuff, all these types of things. So building that quality team, then making those decisions, that stuff makes sense. The thing that I think is unfamiliar to the successful business person is they're not dealing with a vendor or an investor or a customer, meaning they can get rid of those people and find another one.
Yeah.
If you're negotiating with somebody in a typical arm's length deal and you don't like the terms, well, you can just walk away and go find another vendor or, customer, whatever. But in this environment, you're stuck with your spouse and you've got one person to deal with. And then you add in the other X factors, the judge.
Yeah.
So now you have a third party who doesn't know you or only knows what they learn about you through. I always say it's like looking at something through a straw. They look, if they're at a trial and they're looking at the evidence, they're restricted at what they can learn about you. They don't know the entire universe of information about you. They only know what they see through the rules of evidence and through what your lawyer presents. So they're seeing a very limited picture and they're time limited. So if you're expecting that person to come up with an ideal custom solution for you that's going to be meeting your needs, you're probably going to be mistaken some percentage of the time. So explaining that environment helps frame the client's understanding of what they're going to need to deal with and understand in the larger context, and then make better decisions. So that's part of it is sort of framing and laying the groundwork. And then the advice, the legal guidance makes more sense.
Yeah. So it's just putting that foundation down. I mean, what you're saying is 100% correct, right? Like I've said so many times, if you end up having to go to trial, and there's circumstances where you will have to,
Right.
You're dealing with somebody who's overworked, underpaid, and is in extreme time poverty. And
Yes.
then a lot of the times the question, for them, or that's being asked is, here, can you have a full encapsulation of a 20-year relationship? And
Right.
can you figure this out in, X number of hours, right? It doesn't even matter how many hours they get to do it. It's impossible to fully understand all this stuff. So you have to be very selective on how you present yourself. And if you,
Yes.
choose to come across as like a combative, hostile jerk on the stand, and she's saying that you're an abusive, narcissistic sociopath, that's probably not going to play well because you look like an abusive, narcissistic sociopath when you act like that on the stand. It's just going to reinforce that sort of depiction. Whether or not it's true, it doesn't really matter. It's certainly going to get reinforced by doing that.
I talk about that in a chapter in the book called The Meta Case, and before Zuckerberg renamed Facebook. So it's the meta case is the case around the case. And you discussed this also. You hit the nail on the head. This is the concept of the things that aren't the law and the facts, but are critical to the outcome. And that's the impression the judge has of you and or your lawyer, your legal team, the professionals working with you, maybe the expert witness who testifies on your behalf. And the credibility of those folks carries through to impacting your case. So not just, you're on stage from the minute that you walk in. I was taught in trial practice. I had some great trial lawyers teach me trial practice in law school and great mentors later, but they said, just understand you're on stage, not from the time you walk in the courtroom, but from the time you get out of your car in the parking lot.
That's true.
Because prospective jurors are walking from their cars to go into the courthouse. And if they see you treat somebody poorly by the door, or you do something goofy on the way into the courthouse, you never know who's watching. And so if you act like you're always on stage, you're safer because you are on stage, and jurors and the judge will make judgments about you whether you like it or not. And you're absolutely right. That demeanor on the stand for that limited time the judge gets to see you, that's the only impression the court has of you, other than other people telling them the court stuff. So yeah, it's critical to make a good impression on the court. And that also includes your behavior during the litigation leading up to trial, because in our area, usually the same judge hears the trial who's also with you through the 1-2 years you are litigating. So if you're doing underhanded or jerky stuff, that's probably not going to rub off well on you. That doesn't mean that you can't be smart about tactics. And you can be wise about tactics, but also maintain a professional, positive outlook that presents the best appearance to a court. And
so what would be like an example of that, like positive tactic that works in your favor that can play out well for you? And I guess by contrast, what would be an example of one of those underhanded tactics that may come back to bite you in the ass at trial?
Well, one of the things, so sometimes folks will advise cutting off people financially to motivate a spouse to the settlement table. And I understand that. That's not unusual. Mm-hmm. The judges have seen this movie before. And it's not like the first person ever figured this out. Does it work sometimes? Yes. Does it fail more often than not? Probably. Your mileage may vary depending on your circumstances, obviously. But these are kind of, if you kind of end up looking like a jerk, like you're a high net worth, high income person, but you stop paying the bills for the home and everything else, and the other person has to file a motion to cause you to pay the bills again. That's just not a good look for the court. And these are things judges remember. Like, why did the guy do that? There was no need to do that other than trying to aggravate the spouse. So that I'm giving an isolated example. And sometimes that might, I'll give the counter example. If you have a spouse that's a spendthrift, is wasting a ton of money on credit cards, buying junk on Amazon, cutting off the credit card makes sense. But keep paying the mortgage. It's a proportionality type thing.
Like pay for the expenses, like the household expenses, and then there's like a roof, and there's food, and there's power, and there's water, and all that stuff. But if there's superfluous kind of crap that's being run through on whatever, you have the ability.
Some people go crazy on we've got these cases where people go on shopping sprees and they spend thousands of dollars a month on nonsense. That's different. But cutting off the money for groceries and not paying the car payment and stuff like that those are like self-inflicted wounds. That's just easy for the other lawyer to jump in and make you look like a jerk. And those are like forced errors, as they say in baseball. Or unforced errors, whatever. And that isn't the best way to accomplish your objective, in my opinion, but from my experience. This is one example.
I've seen something almost exactly like that. I had this crazy file with. I was on for the women's side. This is years and years and years ago, and this guy, he was super successful, really well off. The divorce happened, I think it was in like 1990. Okay, and I was dealing with this in 2020 approximately.
Okay,
and the only reason, so everything got reopened. Everything got reopened with the divorce. It had already been done. It had already been finalized forever ago. And the only reason this got reopened is because the guy demanded he stopped paying alimony and demanded proof of life before he would pay it again. And his theory that was like she had died or something like that, or whatever,
Really?
some sort of yeah. And it even like in discovery, counsel asked him, what would be an example of proof of life? Like would a picture of her with today's newspaper work or something like that?
Would that be good? Yeah.
In discovery. And he's like, yeah, actually that would have been great. That would be perfect. You know what I mean? And it ended up really biting him in the ass because it opened up everything. We ended up finding tons of hidden assets and all this kind of stuff that was like completely glanced over during the time of the divorce way back in the 1990s.
Relative to this fairly small issue of maintenance, instead, everything got back on the table.
Reopened, huge litigation fees, found a bunch of stuff that cost him a ton of money, like millions of dollars, because there was hidden assets back then. He just didn't disclose it. And he completely dealt with it wildly incorrectly, and it really, really burned him with that kind of game playing attitude.
So here's a story that's, I think, parallel and illustrative of where high net worth, high income person needs to be careful. And this is a real story from very recent. So we just finished a divorce trial. One of our attorneys finished this case just recently. It involved a large company. I won't mention the type of business, but valuation experts on both sides, very high incomes for the owner, and the business was according to the owner, tanking. And but apparently the numbers didn't seem to show that it was in trouble. But this was what he said to the valuation experts, and they had a difference of opinion on the value. Also, not a shock for people that do this work. But only a week or two after the trial was completed and the judgment was not yet entered, so the court has not written its solution or resolution to this case yet, we find out that the person or this company has opened a new location in another state and proudly announced it online. And this is let's just say it's a giant location, and it certainly doesn't look like the company's doing poorly. It looks like things are going gangbusters and going great. And we raised this to the court, and the court has reopened the proofs to let us go back in and introduce evidence about this. And it's now thrown, it's hammered the credibility of the business owner, because they were sitting there, they didn't disclose that this other thing existed. Now they're going to have to explain this whole thing. And the valuation experts will get a chance to dig back into this and see how it affects the opinion of value. Had this person just kept their powder dry for X amount of time, be a different story. But it's funny, when you tell people, like, don't make any, one obvious thing to say to somebody who's in this position is, don't start any new companies, don't buy any new stuff, don't do anything. There's a guy who gives instructions to pilots on YouTube. I love this guy. It's Blanco Lirio channel. So shout out to Juan Brown. But he says, don't do anything dumb, dangerous, or different. And that's kind of, it's like the same advice. Don't do anything dumb, dangerous, or different. Like, don't start a new company. Don't buy a piece of real estate unless sometimes you have no choice. And you counsel the business owner, look, sometimes a business opportunity arises that, even the fact that it's now going to be considered in our state a marital asset, if there's debt against it, that would be, you work on the net value of it, but you may have to take the opportunity and not wait till the case is over. But in most circumstances, we would prefer to have all these things happen after the case is over with.
Yeah, so, I mean, preventing that. Yeah, don't make. Don't make the mistake of passing up great opportunities. I've talked to guys about this too. I'm sure you've had this conversation.
Oh, this is right.
Times.
Yes, you've talked about this too in your content, and you're absolutely right. And you and I've seen this too many times where people lock down. And I'd like to hear you talk about your side of that. What you think about that?
Well, I mean, I think it's the same argument as, I don't want to make more money because then I have to pay more money in tax. And it's like, well,
yes,
I'd rather you make 5 times more money and pay, more in tax, but you're net way ahead. So don't
That's
just like stop taking opportunities. Don't withhold the ability for you to like earn an income or something like that. Oh, just because I have to pay my ex-wife alimony, I have to pay her more
Right.
money. Like it's stupid. That's such a dumb way to look at it because at the end of the day, I mean, whether she's driving a Volvo SUV or a Lambo SUV, I don't really care if I have two Lambo SUVs. Like it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
You
Like
got to keep
it's
perspective.
ridiculous. Yeah, you got to keep perspective.
You're absolutely right. And too many people hesitate based on that. Like, well, I don't want to give it to my ex-wife. Well, you don't want to succeed. You don't want to grow. It seems like you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. And that's a great point. What we have in our state, the total amount most people are going to pay in support, it's usually somewhere around a third. I'm generalizing, but
Yeah.
it's less than it used to be. It used to be the worst case was about 50% of your income could go to support, like in toto. It's lower now than it was once. And so I said, well, when you were married, you were sharing 50% of the money or more with your spouse. Now it's 30%. Like, look on the bright side. You're money ahead, and don't miss opportunities. You're going to grow the whole pie, and you don't need to worry about it. It's in the rearview mirror. So you're right. Don't forego life opportunities or business opportunities because you're worried about sharing it with your ex or whatever. That's just like you said. That's just like the tax argument is a really good analogy. Like, oh, I'm going to share X amount with the government. Well, okay, but do you want to miss the opportunity? There's one analogous thing I wanted to mention that you reminded me of when you were talking about this. I think you'll find interesting. There's never a good time to get divorced, so get it over with. And I'll give a real example from a ultra high net worth case. So a gentleman called me with a referral. This is many years ago. And he was I can't name the nature of the business. Unlike other lawyers, I don't go around being specific enough to define anything. I don't want any clients, to be unmasked or whatever. But this gentleman said, my business is making, let's just say, it would be 8 figures in revenue.
Okay.
And it's going gangbusters, it's going great. And we have and I said, okay, well, he's saying, I'm thinking about divorce. I said, okay, sure. And what's it going to cost? Blah, blah, blah. Do you have a prenup? And he says, no. I said, well, it's going to cost you half. And he said, well, how does that work? And I said, well, she's not going to get the company or stock. You're going to pay her over time. And the judge is going to work out something that doesn't destroy you. You're going to continue with the business. And the one good thing about the court is they don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden egg, in my experience. We're going to build in some plan. You're going to pay over time. It's not fun, but it'll be over with. You put a price tag on it and you're done. And I said, well, how's revenue growth? Oh man, it's going phenomenal. We have all this stuff going on. I've got big plans for next year, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, the time to start is yesterday because you're just going to keep sharing 50% of a bigger number every month that goes by. There's no amount. He was worried about attorney's fees, which is a pittance compared to the size of his estate, and also potential downsides. And I said, well, we kind of talked about how bad it could be. And I said, well, it's a lot easier to share. Let's just make up a number. I'd rather give somebody half of $20 million now than half of $40 million in a year and a half. This is easy math. And so those cases are simple. That's like, just get it done. And I said to him, throw as much money as you can at your spouse to get it over with. Like I'm exaggerating to make a point. That doesn't mean be dumb, but you probably want to give a little bit more than you maybe should, in quotes, just to get it done. And you talk about that in your book, rightly so. I think you talk about the best offer, or like make a statement about make the good offer. If you make a jerky offer and you lowball, everybody knows the lowball. That's not an offer. But, consider your costs. And this is what's great about talking with you is you get all this, and it makes me tie in things to what you're talking about. And that is when you make a cost benefit analysis, thinking about not only the financial costs of a divorce, which everybody talks about attorney's fees, But we just talked about another cost, which is really an opportunity cost, right? The lost growth you could have had in your company. We just gave half of it to your spouse because we waited, because we were in fear of today. So we traded away for a worse tomorrow instead of just getting it over with. So that's one thing. But then we have attorney's fees, opportunity cost. We have what I call cash burn rate, which is people just spend more during divorce. Since you do financial work as your specialty, everybody just buys clothes. They get another place. They tend to eat out more. There's usually just a lot more expenses.
And they take their kids out more to do stuff. Like suddenly, they're going on vacations that they would have never gone on before. They're going to Disney for, a month. They're going on a round world cruise or something. Like it's totally different.
Yeah. The burn rate goes up, and then the wife decides to go on a vacation with the girlfriends that she's never done before to Vail or something. And now the bills just pile up. So it's not just attorney's fees. It's this cash burn cranks up for whatever reason. It just seems to happen in these cases. And then we have the mental drag on your career.
Yeah.
So you can't focus on your job because you are thinking about your divorce, and it's occupying some portion of your wavelengths, your available bandwidth. And so there's a drag on your career. I don't care how great you are, how focused you are. My blood pressure was through the roof when I was getting divorced and I had an amicable divorce. And just the stress and tension was tremendous. And you're not performing at your best. Nobody can. So that's part of it. And then, and then the emotional impact on your children and your family and friends. The broader emotional impact and harm it does to people to be in suspended animation waiting for this to be done is substantial. So when you add all those costs up, the sooner you can get it done, typically the better.
Yeah. And plus, at that point, the earlier you recognize, I think, the writing on the wall, other than like all those great points, opportunity costs, thinking long-term, and just recognizing sort of the downstream damage, is the sooner you get it done, the more likely it is that there's actually some personal goodwill still within that relationship, which means that there is some trust left. There's still some respect. Maybe she's even attracted to you a little bit still, or even is attracted to you. But that gives you the ability to sort of navigate your way towards a more successful settlement that way that actually works for everybody, because maybe she's willing just to take a little bit less because she still trusts you. She still thinks you're a good guy. She still thinks you're good with the kids, whatever, right? That you're going to take care of her.
Right.
Whatever the circumstances may be, she's more willing to see that possibility rather than, in 2 years from now when she hates you and she's like, has to lock up the knives at night to make sure that she doesn't just wake up and stab you while she's sleepwalking or something, right? Like, it's a totally different environment at that stage.
Well, no, that's true. When you've got and I'd say many of our clients kind of fall in that category of they have a pretty good relationship with their spouse, I'd say largely, and they just want to get divorced. And it's over for whatever reason. And they tried the things, they went to counseling and things like that. They made an effort. But you're right, they're able to trade on some of that goodwill where one of two things happens. Either, like you said, they're able to get a bit of a better deal because there's a lot of goodwill there. Also, they're able to get it done more quickly because their spouse trusts them. They haven't done anything to lose even though they know they're out of love or there's not a romantic relationship anymore, they don't think they're going to get stabbed in the back. And many times that is able to help buy you the getting it done part is
it buys you getting the
because
done part.
People have faith that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And then that enables a lot of things, like you're not going to have a custody fight because they believe you're a good dad and that you're going to be reasonable with them about parenting time or visitation. And so those things come much more easily. And then once somebody gets angry, then people are getting emotional and they're not making rational decisions. And then you get into that unfortunate place where people are fighting just to fight and to try to use the system to punish somebody. And that's where you get into trouble. That's where people stop using rational thinking and they're just bashing.
Yeah, that's the hardest. I mean, you've seen that. I've seen that too, where people use the court system as like a justice system. It's like it's not a justice system. It's a guy with a giant axe that goes here,
Yeah.
half and half, done, bye. Like next, right? And
Yes.
it's just the experts and the legal counsel is just telling them on where to cut it at the 50% mark. But it's not supposed to be a justice system. It's not supposed to penalize the other person for being, mean. That's the point of a no-fault divorce. Just because you snore too much doesn't mean that you should get less or, whatever else happened. I'm sure there's worse cases.
That's an excellent point, and I think that's something I talk about too. This is where I talk about the limitations of the system, and we have a binary court system: win, lose, guilty, not guilty. It's very bad at shades of gray, as you point out. And I've said before that the judge is not a surgeon with a scalpel doing microsurgery. It's more like a meat axe. And and it has to be, because the system, as you said, doesn't have time for detailed surgery. I mean, and some of these things, when you're talking about business valuation or whatever, there will be hours of testimony about why a company should be worth X or Y. But still, it's not the precision solution that you would want.
It never is. It can't be. I mean, the foundation of our law, and I'm not an expert here, so you can comment better on this. But I'm going to give it a shot. The foundation of law is that it treats everybody equally, right? So we can't really afford to give people different treatment based on different circumstances. It's
right.
Trying to factor in the different elements of the case and to the judge's discretion to say, here's what, I think is best given the circumstances, but still treating everybody equally. Doesn't mean it's fair, but it's equal. That's
actually one of my colleagues in the business is retired now, said fair is a 4-letter F word, because it's a relative concept. Your point is well taken, that the court is based on equity, which is not necessarily equal. It's equitable, meaning it might not be 50-50, although most often it is. Mm-hmm. But the 4-letter F word means when you're like negotiating, your fair is not the same as my fair necessarily, right? And then the one thing that people get confused is the sort of moral fairness with what the court solution is going to be, which is sort of what you're getting at. And that is, it's not fair that you've been married to somebody for 25 years and earned a lot of money, took care of all the bills, did all the things you're supposed to do, and they have an affair and run away on you. Now, let's just make it simple. And that's not fair. It's cosmically or morally not fair. But the law just says, like you said, here's your half. Then we're going to work out child support and alimony or maintenance and figure out a custody schedule or visitation schedule. And there you go. And in most states in the United States, we don't have a fault concept connected to any kind of financial penalty. Some states are very different. Like in the South, in South Carolina, if you prove adultery, you don't get alimony. So there's some extreme remedies available in other states, but the majority of states in the U.S. are no fault, like you're saying. But it's when you understand these concepts, then it helps people understand the playing field and then make those decisions like we're talking about.
Yeah. And I mean, the interesting thing, I don't know if you've seen this too online, is the sort of prevalent combativeness or like battle of the sexes almost. And, what I'm seeing a lot of now is there's no point in getting married. And I would argue that there is a point.
Don't say that. That's going to hurt my business. Don't tell, and yours too. Come on, don't let the secret out. No, but you're not wrong. I mean, this is definitely all over social. I mean, I'll agree to that. Now, whether that's truly representative of society, but let's talk with some interesting stats though. So finish your thought, because this is a really interesting topic, because I'd like to chime in on this.
Beautiful. So, I mean, I see this online all the time. I think that there's plenty of good reasons to get married. And there's plenty of circumstances where it makes perfect sense. And I think taking risk mitigation strategies and realizing that there's two ways marriages end, which is death, right? Number one, or you get divorced. Those are the two ways. You got to pick one if you have a choice, but you should prepare for both and mitigate your risks accordingly. And there's avenues to do that. There's relationship contracts, there's cohabitation agreements, there's prenups, there's postnups, whatever. Or just marry somebody richer than you.
That's the easiest one.
Yeah, there's a good way. There's different ways. There's different ways to do this, but I think men, especially now today, are kind of seeing this online warfare, and really, a lot of guys are taking the stance that it's never worth it. And I don't know if they realize that the law still exists even if you're not married.
Right. Well, if they have a child with somebody,
Especially.
they're paying child support, certainly, and they're dealing with visitation. I mean, they're not sharing assets, but child support could be substantial, obviously. College expenses, depending on the state, they'd be on the hook for that. And sure, yeah, like I agree with you. So I'm kind of two minds about this, because I'm a fan of marriage. I like it so much I've done it twice. That's what I tell people. I'm remarried, and for me, I like it, even though I've been divorced before. Now, do I have a prenup? Yes, absolutely, I do. Sure, I have a really great prenup. Why? I wrote it. And my wife happens to be my law partner, who's a divorce lawyer, and she wanted a good one too. So it's, because we each have children from our previous relationship, and really we both kind of want our assets to go to the kids. So we built a structure like that. But I got married when I was 21 the first time. Neither of us had anything. So what's interesting in that sense is, when you get married, when neither of you have anything and you're in for a penny, in for a pound, if things don't go right after 15 or 20 years, it doesn't make it easy. But sort of morally or philosophically, you figure, well, it's fair enough. We had a good run X amount of time. The whole marriage wasn't terrible. There was something good. That we have kids. We had some good times, and it didn't work out. And I think people can be more okay with that. The tough one is the short marriage. Especially where there's a financial imbalance. Somebody makes a lot of the money, they pay a lot of the bills for 5 years, or fill in the blank, a fairly short period of time, and then the person leaves them. And that's where they feel like they got ripped off, kind of in a real and cosmic sense or moral sense. And that's when I'm talking to people about prenups, I tell people, you're not worried about getting divorced in 30 years. I mean, maybe you are, but most people are worried about it getting divorced in 3 years, 5 years, 7, where they put in all this commitment and effort, and they spent money on the wedding and all this stuff, and kind of get ripped off. I think that's really the use case people are mostly concerned about when they're looking at a prenup, which is understandable, unless they have a family business or they have a lot of premarital assets to protect the kind of the obvious case. So, I kind of like the commitment of marriage. I know that sounds fun. I'm not trying to talk my own book, and I don't mean my paper book, but like trying to get people to get married. And I got accused of that on social media before. Like, well, of course you're trying to get more people married so they get divorced. I'm like, oh, sure. Like, the slowest lead generation strategy ever is I promote marriage so that more people get divorced. That's working well. No.
Yeah, you get 35% of people who get married are going to come to you one day. Maybe it's in 5 years, maybe it's in 10 years. Yeah, right.
That's a slow strategy. I need to find a better business strategy than that. And also, I did a lot of other things before I did divorce. I'll just do something else. So I don't need I did business law. I did transactional work. I did jury trials, and divorce I sort of fell into accidentally 25 years ago, or 21, 22 years ago. And
no kidding. I'm not sure I was 100% aware of that. What's the story with that?
It's pretty funny. I wasn't a divorce lawyer. In fact, I said I would never do it when I was finishing law school. I should never make proclamations like this, but I told a buddy in law school, I'm never going to do criminal and divorce. That's like a dirty business. I'm not doing it. And I ended up doing personal injury defense work for a while, auto accidents.
Yeah.
I did civil litigation. So I did a lot of breach of contract cases between businesses. I did business freeze out and squeeze out litigation, which is basically business divorces. And I did deals, purchasing and selling businesses, setting up business entities. One of the good things that helped me with is understanding how all this stuff works. So later when I was doing divorce work, I had much more of a familiarity with it than most of my divorce lawyer colleagues who were kind of grew up in the divorce business. So
Yeah.
for the first 10 years or so of my career, I was doing this other stuff. And then a personal injury client asked me to do her divorce case. And I said, I don't do divorce. I'll give you a referral. Gave her a referral to a person. She called me back a week later and said the guy was a real jerk, which I never heard anybody complain. And she said, I want you to do my divorce. It can't be that complicated. I'm sure you can do it. You know, you're a nice guy and you seem like you're a smart lawyer. You help me with this other case. I'm sure you can figure it out. So I had a different law firm. Then I talked to my partner and he said, yeah, sure. He'd had like 2 or 3 divorce cases. And he said, oh, they're easy. You get continuances all the time. Everybody agrees to everything. He's like, take the case. So I took it. I told her I would learn the law on my dime, and I bought the books. And a lawyer across the hall from our office, who's now a judge, helped me with sort of the stuff that's not in the books. Mm-hmm. And I was helping her with stuff about personal injury that wasn't in the books. They had a couple PI cases. So that's how it started. And then I was trying to get business clients. I was trying to grow my commercial litigation and business book. So I was meeting all kinds of financial planners, accountants, and
all
building
the
that.
dorky, nerdy guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And going to the Chamber of Commerce and all this stuff. And I'm 31, 32 years old. And then I go and I'm getting calls from this lady's friends and then their friends and more and more. And it just grew without me doing anything. And it was just word of mouth referrals. And at some point, I was doing about 50%. I picked up a large Fortune 500 company as a client.
Okay.
The guy found me on the web, one of their people that was assigning legal work in the Chicago area, and ended up doing that work in federal court, state court, and doing divorce like 50-50. And it was kind of this split personality. And then I was at a firm that was able to do both. And then I got recruited by my present firm, and they said, look, you can only do divorce. That's all we do. So this firm had a different name. It's STG Divorce Law now, but it was Sullivan, Taylor, Gumina. And I joined them and I left the commercial stuff, brought the divorce work over, but it just kind of grew by itself. And I eventually realized this is the world telling me this is the guy I need to be. And sometimes, you choose, and sometimes the world chooses you. And this was the universe telling me this was my thing. And I guess I was good at it. And I think I brought a bit of a different approach, which was less. I think a lot of divorce lawyers just kind of do what the client says and follow the emotion, and they just start, I say pulling triggers, or like shooting bullets.
Yeah.
And instead, I like taking a more thoughtful approach. Like, let's sit down and plan this out. Let's try to negotiate first. And it's just in line with what you say in your book, which is let's make your best offer. Let's be reasonable. Failing that, okay, if we have to go to war, we will. But we'll make a good faith effort at negotiating a deal. If we've done our best, okay. If we fight, we fight, and we'll do what we got to do. But I think too often we get into combat without first preparing properly and really explaining to the clients the true cost of that war. Like you and I've talked about, how long is this going to take? How much money is this going to cost? How much emotional energy will this drain? And what are these outside factors? And I don't know that a lot of divorce lawyers think about like the growth in the person's business or ask them, hey, do you have any big deals on the horizon? Are you guys coming up with some new IP? Is your company coming up with a patentable process in the near future? Or are you building are you going to build some new equity in the near future? Well, we should be aware of that, because that informs that divorce decision and what offer you want to make. You might want to really sweeten that deal. I talked to a celebrity on the West Coast. Can't name names, but a person called me for divorce coaching when the book was launching.
Cool.
And found out I mass marketed a bunch of podcasts, sent out the book as an advance, and wanted to appear on shows. And I got a person reached out. One of the people I wanted to have on my show, or wanted to be on their show, said, I don't need this. I'm happily married, but my friend could use it. Would you mind sending a copy to them? So we did. And I ended up talking to that person, and they were in a situation where their rocket ship was taking off. They were tremendous, giant increase in followers on social media. Their business was increasing rapidly. And we had this discussion of, you're basically building this to give to your spouse. So they were engaged in litigation in California and had well-known counsel there. And they were just battling, pop, 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 like the term I use is rock'em sock'em robots. If you're a certain age, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The plastic robots that punch each other until you punch them in the chin and the head pops off. Well, that's all they were doing, but with no concept in sight of what's the end game. It was just motion after motion, kind of like a Three Stooges, Mo, Larry, and Curly like eye poking session where we're not getting anywhere. And so I said to the person, I said, what do they want? And the person says X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, what's your lawyer telling you? Well, they should only get half, like, well, do you realize that's a moving target? Like every week that goes by, the half gets bigger. And the longer you wait, they're going to go back and ask for more discovery. Mm-hmm. And we're just going to keep spinning wheels with this thing. So it's that perspective. And there's that time value of money too. And the money value of time.
Yeah, I mean, that's so profound. I mean, honestly, I think there's very few lawyers who think that way. I don't think I'm trying to think. I haven't run across anyone who's in the legal profession who's talked about that ever, other than you.
I think that's
dealt with
because
a lot
I
of
come
lawyers,
from this.
But...
Well, I appreciate that. And I think that's because I come from this other background, and I had a lot of business clients in the business transactional space and business litigation space where they said, hey, I stand to gain, let's just throw a number out. This case is worth $500,000 to me. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I only want to spend X amount on attorney's fees, and I only want to spend so much of my mental bandwidth on this, or it isn't worth it to me. Well, that analysis makes sense in divorce cases too. Now, sometimes you just can't control it. And we were talking about this earlier, and the other side's just fighting to fight.
Yeah.
Or they're hell-bent on a course of action you just can't agree with. There is no settlement. For example, spouse wants to take the kids to California and you live in Illinois, and, and you can't have that. Well, we're just going to have a custody fight. There's no other choice. There's a binary outcome. You can't settle for half.
No. I mean, you have the choice of let it happen or not, or fight for it to not happen. That's it. Those are your choices. That's your control.
Those are, I say those are simple but hard decisions because they're simple to make. You have no choice. I want the kids to stay here. Okay. Hard because we're going to spend money, time, grief, but we've got to do it. And so those are the easier recommendations to make as a lawyer because, they're self-evident. You're not doing much persuading. The client's like, look, I can't have the kids move to Illinois. I want to be with them. I want to be a part of their life.
Yeah. I mean, those are cut and dry. I mean, it's like, can I move to California and do my work there? No. Okay. So therefore we're staying in Illinois. Like that's it. And
that's actually great that you mentioned that because that's the first place I go to. Is there a practical, non-legal solution? Can we just move? And, in this day and age, maybe that's feasible. Or, especially if you've got access to wealth and you're able to work remotely, maybe that's a better solution. And also thinking big picture for the children, is most of the family in California or is most of the family here in Illinois? Why? So that's a good consideration too, is really asking the client about the 360 degrees of the problem. Because we tend to we all do this. We classify things in boxes because that's how we process, and we're eventually hunter-gatherer society. So we say hyena threat, bear threat, and our brains classify things in boxes because it helps us process. So when lawyers hear removal or relocation to another state or in Canada to another part of the country, we think, oh, we need to fight this. We just have to, it's a custody battle. Well, maybe not. Let's get creative and think, let's ask the client about all the issues that are involved and get a better understanding. spend 45 minutes, ask a few more questions, and maybe give the client a much better answer than, okay, we'll go file a petition right now for custody, and we'll engage in this. It's easy to just see the custody fight light blinking on the cockpit control panel and just start pulling triggers. That's like, oh, let's step back for a second and see, is this really the best thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's so emotional with children. I had an experience with that recently. I was dealing with a client, just helping them with divorce coaching, a man. And his wife had sent back something in their custody agreement, a suggestion, and it was something along the lines of days spent like attending school functions, like if they're going on a school trip or something. So if you go along as a parent, as a custodian or whatever, it would be excluded from the custody days calculation in their formula in their state. Okay. And he was originally like, he wanted it to be included. And he was like, well, if she gets to go on the field trip for the day, that should count towards her time, right? I see. And I said to him, I said, look, like, firstly, what's the most important thing for the kids, right? Like, do we want to introduce basically a penalty for a parent to participate in a school trip with their children?
Great point.
Right? And he's like, you know what? No, that's a good point, because I think it'd be better if she was there, or if I have the chance to go, it'd be great if I was there. And it shouldn't really be like withheld or have a penalty attached to it just because I'm going on a school trip. So great. So we can just let that go. Like,
that's excellent. And I call that balance sheet parenting, by the way. Cause like, oh, I want the day counting this, I want as many days. I want to work, why don't you just care about being with the child and don't get all hung up on the days? Let's do what the child is best for the child, like you're saying. And the other thing people don't realize is, and this is where your experience comes in is very valuable. And what we tell our clients is, hey, these are two-way streets. People always think about it from their perspective, like, I don't want the days counted in her favor. What about you? Now you're going to get it back in the other direction. Now they're going to count days against you. It's, oh, you exceeded your allotment. Now you don't get to see Johnny on Tuesday. You don't want to do that.
No, that's the last thing that you want.
Yeah, you're creating a system you're gonna get blown up on your own grenade. Hoisting your own petard. those playing the home game. So it's those kind of things. And when we're talking about custody and visitation and holiday schedules, people will always say, well, let's say it's January and we're negotiating, and they say like, well, I want spring break. For us, it's like, a week in March for the kids' school spring break. Well, then you have to tell them, well, next year you're not going to get spring break. And, right now it seems good. And then they say, oh, yeah, that's right. You have to think about what the flip side. It's a two-way street. So
I always say, give them the first holiday. Give your ex the first holiday to buy goodwill for later stuff.
Sure.
Because it's going to be soon, right? Like maybe, Christmas is coming up at the time that we're talking about this.
Right.
Like give them a little bit of extra around Christmas. Like if it's Christmas Day is the thing that's really important, give them that this year, because it'll help to buy some goodwill in this negotiating process, because they feel like they're getting a win early.
Sure. And so what? It's painless. Who cares? Let's not, like you said, in hindsight, nobody's going to remember it. It's good for the kids. And don't let the kids know any of this discussion's going on. It should be transparent to, especially children just shouldn't know about this stuff, and work it out. Like the first Christmas, I actually went back to my house where my kids were with my ex-wife, and we did Christmas like we always did. The kids were they were 18 and 14. And okay. We thought the best thing, because it was still recent, we got divorced in July, I think, of 2015. So December 15, we had Christmas like we always did in the house. We thought it was just too soon to try to have two Christmases. Mm-hmm. And we talked to a parent counselor who I love in our area, who advised my clients for years. And she said, hey, if it works for you guys, do it. And I think the boys appreciated that, and that it was already disruptive enough. We tried to keep the holiday schedule as much the same as it always had been for those holidays, for Thanksgiving and Christmas, because it was so soon after the divorce happened. And then the year after that, we started doing like different things, but we still live fairly close together. But it's, yeah, that kind of stuff, being reasonable on those things that don't cost anything can go a long way to buying a lot of goodwill. And if you're interested in dollars, can translate to a lot of cash too, and time saved. So
time.
It's really that is looking at this from a different level, which is what your book offers. It's and what I aimed to offer was taking a step back and looking at this from a higher level rather than just getting right into the trenches and starting to shoot at each other. And so, like, before we do this, here's why this is the way it is. Mm-hmm. Here's how this is generally going to go. And here's, so you're aware of this and you can do better than the average person because you're armed with this knowledge.
I mean, it makes such a huge difference, right, Rafe? And I know, like, based on your experience too, it's odd to run into family lawyers who speak on financial issues with any degree of confidence, because usually it's like really baseline. I know how to read maybe a personal tax return and that's it. And
right.
A lot of my cases when I get hired for, especially in the divorce consulting field, is because the family lawyers and the divorce attorneys who are dealing with just general, they have the general practice. They don't see high net worth cases or ultra high net worth cases like ever. You know, they see two a year or something like that. And there's no real way to develop a baseline competency. So they hire me to like figure out what the hell's going on and tell them what to do. It's like, you know, I'm a ghost lawyer, you know, like say this.
That's where building that team is valuable. And it is important for a professional to know their limitations. And so I have a huge case I'm handling right now. One of the few I still handle. I'm co-counseling it. It's actually out of my home area, but it's in Illinois. But we brought in a financial professional like you in this case because the sheer amount of transactions involved with all these entities is way beyond any law firm's ability to process. It's just not and also you need an expert witness to testify about what's going on with all these money flows. It's not enough to just have a little cross-examination even the business owner, the owner won't know what's going on. It's too complex. Mm-hmm. You know, a CEO level person isn't expected to know the operations at one of the subs. You know, when there's 40 entities you're dealing with, the boss doesn't know all the little things going on at every little business. They shouldn't have to know that stuff. So you need to get professionals involved to digest that information, break it down into usable chunks, and then be able to testify to it in court with competency to make the case, pro, con, whatever side it's on, whether you're on the spouse who owns that stuff to explain how it all works or the spouse who's on the other side of it. There's no substitute for a qualified expert in your field to not only help the lawyer understand what's going on, but make the case, both forming up a settlement model, understand that, and then secondly, presenting the issues to the court if necessary. And yeah, with this case, we might be able to understand the basics of, I understand the revenue and all that, the stuff that you can see in P&Ls and balance sheets, but the millions of transactions going on between these entities and with multiple operating companies and at least 40 pieces of substantial commercial real estate involved in this thing.
Oh man.
It's also a waste of resources to spend attorney's fees at the cost of the attorney for this work when it can be done more efficiently by an expert with the financial background.
Yeah. And it's such a weird, I had a great file years ago and it really, it illuminates that example really well. It was a complex file and the opposing side, the husband, he was a part of a family business. So he and his brother basically owned the company. And it was one of the most underhanded, crazy tricks that I've seen someone try to play.
And that's saying a lot because you've been doing this for a while.
Well, this was wild because it took me a bit to figure it out. So they invited me to come to their office to talk about the evaluation and sort of their aspect of things. And I talked to counsel and I talked to my client and stuff like that. And I said, okay, great. I'm happy to come. I'm independent in this. I'm an expert in this capacity for this case. So I'm independent. Just tell me whatever you want to say, and I'll have that conversation. So we go, and these guys, it's him and his brother. They meet. They're really amicable. They're, very forthcoming with a lot of detail. They're happy to provide information. They already had a valuation done by another valuation company. They give me a copy of that, and they sort of give me this whole, this whole backstory, right, as to the valuation and why they had it, and et cetera, and why it's reasonable. I said, okay, great. And I went back. I went through the conversation with counsel and the client, and so I said, well, they're being really forthcoming. The number's a little odd, though. I got to take a look at the valuation report because something seems a little bit off. And some time passes by, and I read through it. I go, well, sounds reasonable. And then I'm sitting and just thinking about it, and I go, wait. The basis of this company, the way that it was valued, was they just looked at one component of the company. So they just took like the profit. There's a bunch of different corporations. So that there's property holdings, there's holding companies, there's the stuff that they're renting to produce whatever it is that they're making. Then there's the operating, like the sales end of it. So the valuator smushed it all together and said, here, this is how we're valuing it. And these are all different types of businesses. This is the valuation thing there. And then I'm looking at it one day and I go, wait a second. They're not even valuing it properly. Like, they haven't broken it down corporation by corporation and assessed the risks and everything differently. They haven't done the valuations on each company differently. And even then, what I realized is that they were basing the valuation on the shareholders agreement, not on how it should have been valued in the first place. Sure. And it took me reading through all this stuff, 2 or 3 times to figure out why these guys were being so amicable. And the reason was because at the end of the day, his ex would have gotten like $15 million less if this had just gone through and been rubber stamped than what she ended up getting after going through this process. It's a huge dollar value.
Wasn't using the right valuation approach. That's a big item. And then a lot of times we run into this personal goodwill issue with valuations, where we go back and forth battling over what should be the personal goodwill number, because of course in our state, at least, it drops the value of the business for a divorce case substantially, right? And then it's supposed to translate into maintenance, theoretically. That's supposed to be basically the alimony variable or component. When you slide down the value of the company, theoretically, that's supposed to be represented as income. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting where we had one case recently where the valuation experts, really, they agreed on the value of the company, but they completely disagreed about personal goodwill. One of them was like 20%, the other one was 60%. And it's a large number at the bottom line, so it was a huge impact. And I don't know how you don't really reconcile that by splitting the difference and settling the case. You really have to have them testify, and the judge has to determine their credibility and make a decision. And that's another thing, is sometimes there are just issues that aren't settleable. Where you're at this binary. I mean, you might reach a settlement because you're weighing your chances of success. So maybe you could come to a compromise, but sometimes the number's so big, or the delta is so large, that it's worth your time. It's worth your time and money to take, especially if you believe you have a good shot and you believe you have a credible expert. Then you really have no choice but to try that case, because the court. We have what we call pretrial conferences, and I think there's similar thing. I know there's something similar in Canada, where the judge will give you a recommendation for settlement, and they'll consider memos from both attorneys and chat with the lawyers about what they think the main arguments are and their key points. And then the lawyers will say, well, I think it should be split thus and so with this valuation. The other lawyer makes their pitch, and then the judge can come up with a recommendation. Well, a good judge oftentimes will say, I had one judge say one time, guys, I'm not a slot machine. You know, I don't just come up with a number and then solve your problem for you. He said, without having the experts testify for, in this case, it'd be hours, and show me the exhibits and introduce the documents and give me a chance to read everything, I can't listen to you for 45 minutes and say, oh, Rafe's expert is right, or this other guy's expert is right. And the middle isn't the right number either. That's not the answer. And in fact, our courts in Illinois, our appellate courts have actually said that an arbitrary number is not acceptable, that a trial court must either use one of the expert's opinion numbers or have a reasonable derivation from that figure. So if questions are asked where a judge has a logical variation of the number that they can explain with the evidence, then that's okay. So they might, for example, elicit testimony that the goodwill percentage, you know, the one expert that said it's 60%, they sometimes will explain their range. You know, it's always good to ask, well, is it a hard number? It's really a range, isn't it? For most of the experts, it's usually a ballpark. So the expert will say, well, it's really 50 to 70, but I picked 60. Oh, well, that's interesting. Then the judge theoretically could apply either one of those numbers to come up with a final figure. So it's having the depth of knowledge in this topic is important so that as a lawyer, you know how to communicate with the experts like you that know this stuff, understand the questions to ask, and the advice to give your client on these things.
Oh, you missed the most important part, because the lawyer is the one who's going to end up communicating these arguments in trial too.
Yes, you've got to understand it so you can teach it. That's exactly right. And your purpose, our purpose together, mine and yours, is educating as many people as possible about this stuff so that they're well advised, whether they hire our firm or someone else. I published the book because I wanted more people to know about this stuff. And it initially was to scratch an itch that I had, which was I wanted a book to give to my own clients to say, hey, when we talk about settlement, read chapter 3 about settlements, and then let's talk about it, because frankly, it saves me an hour in explaining this stuff, saves them money and time, and then they understand that whole contextual background, and we can have a much more productive discussion without all the preface stuff.
Yeah, we can actually just get to the meat. Yeah, instead of me having to run divorce law 101 for you for 30 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, and this isn't stuff. And maybe it's divorce law 301 because it isn't the stuff that's just in Google and all that. And that's, you know, what I liked about your book was it's not just stuff that's out there everywhere. It is the Stay Rich information is more advanced stuff that's not really assembled in one place.
Thank you. That's a really that's a touching endorsement from somebody with your wide experience in this field and your depth of knowledge and everything. I really do appreciate that.
Thanks. My pleasure.
Now, what's one thing that men should stop doing in order to have a better divorce?
They should certainly stop being a jerk to their wife. That's number one. It sounds simple, but it's easy to get hostile and negative and all that. So I do advise killing people with kindness. So, you know, fake it till you make it makes sense. So you don't have to love it, but it's sure, you know, the old adage, you catch more flies with honey. It's just easier to be the nice guy and grin and bear it and just be cool. And you're going to buy a lot of goodwill, and you can be upset later and you can defer but showing them you're angry and being a jerk and all that, it just doesn't pay off. I talk about that in the book. I have like kind of rules to things to avoid. And one of them is just being nasty, and there's just no need for it. You can still take an aggressive position in your case or assertive, and you'll be successful in your divorce case, but you're really just causing a lot of static for yourself if you're nasty. And you're just better off generally taking the high road and don't let the little things get to you. You know, like work hard to keep above it. So I would say stop being nasty, accept that it's over, and move forward. And dwelling on it isn't doing you any good. Denying it isn't any good. Just put one foot in front of the other and keep moving, and don't lock down. That's an important stop doing thing. The recriminations and blame game and all that stuff. If she's not into you, if she's done with you, she doesn't care anyway. Like what, who did what to whom. I call it getting historical. That's cool on the History Channel. It's not worth your time. It's actually important. It is important to remember those things and talk to a counselor about that stuff in the future to avoid patterns. I got into some bad patterns in my first marriage. Not blaming my ex for that. I was at fault for some of it too. So, like anything, like sports or combat or a business deal, or football play, it's worth it to watch the tape later. Break it down. What did I do well? What did I do not so well? And what can I do better in the future? And it makes you a better person. So I would say getting historical is valuable that way, but telling the other person about what they did wrong, you're just wasting your time.
You're just going to get more angry from it. It's funny. I just did a post on Instagram about this recently, and it's like, some people are just Porsche people, and they love Porsches. Yes. And I could come and talk to them about Ferraris all day and tell them why Ferraris are better and blah, 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 blah. And no matter what I say, at the end of the day, they're still going to find a reason that Porsches are better. Yeah. That's it. They're Porsche. They're Porsche guys. That's it. The only thing I'm going to end up coming out of this with is frustration after putting all this effort into this presentation as to why Ferraris are better. And they're going to go, well, yeah, but Porsches have the engine in the back, so it's better.
Better engineering.
Or it's German, so it's better. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Same thing.
They made a lot more cars than Ferrari.
Yeah.
You can go get them serviced in my town, and it doesn't cost $15,000 to change the oil.
Move every goalpost. And that's what's going to happen if you're talking to your ex-wife about this. It doesn't matter. She's not going to agree with you that it's all her fault. It doesn't matter. Stop. Just stop the pain.
Well, and you're lowering your status frame, because if you're done, then going back to keep revisiting, re-engaging you're just going down, down, down. If you believe you're right, then just keep moving. Don't keep going back to the well to have the same conversation you had about who did what to whom. You're just keep positioning yourself lower, and your status frame keeps dropping, because clearly you're still hung up on her if you keep going back to revisit the past. That's different than, and I guess what I'm not saying, because my next book is called I Just Want to Know, and it's to help people decide whether to get divorced or stay married.
There we go.
Yeah, it's like a prequel. And if you're in those early stages where you're concerned, but you're not done, then those discussions are valuable, and you should get a professional to help you work through that. And you rightly say in your book about marriage counseling, kind of like it doesn't work. And my preface or my caveat on that is, it works if it's done early enough and people are committed. If most people wait too long, including me, I waited too long, and it was a waste of our time and money when we went to marriage counseling. But I'm a big believer in counseling in general. I wish I would have done it much sooner in my marriage. I was married 24 years the first time. And so that's one of those, I would recommend people try it early rather than waiting till it's like irretrievable. Then you're just, going to the gym right before you're going to have a quintuple bypass because you're way overweight and you haven't taken care of yourself for 20 years. It's a little late for that. You're past that. So it's the same thing. Prevention, to me, the problem is people use marriage counseling as a cure. It's really preventative.
Yeah. I heard someone talk about that once. I forget who it was. Sorry to whoever I'm forgetting right now. But it was something along the lines of you shouldn't go to marriage counseling when things are bad. You should go when they're good.
Yeah, or at least I would say when you have early signs of trouble, if you're having trouble communicating, your needs aren't being met, then get over there and have somebody help you talk through that stuff. And
Yeah, that was the
Maybe
argument
also,
that they were making. It was like it's a lot easier to go from good to great because it's just simple to move from a good place to a great place. It's a lot easier to communicate when you're not under duress that way. And they
right.
kind of likened it to, if you have, I don't know how well the Chicago Blackhawks are doing this year, but they still have a
I don't
coaching
either, actually.
team. They still have a coaching team. I don't know how well the baseball team is doing or whatever. There's still coaches. They're still going to coaches.
Yes,
They're still trying to figure out how to work together as a team. Just because they're good doesn't
exactly.
mean that they don't want to be great. And there's always work
Yep.
there in a marriage where you can always improve. And that
That's
was
a
that was
great
the argument that
analogy.
they were making too. Yeah.
That's kind of like Jordan saying, he'd shoot 1,000. I read he'd shoot 1,000 free throws a day or something like that. And even when he was, clearly established as one of the greats of all time, he still practiced like he was new at the game. And that's and then he also accepted good coaches. Phil Jackson got Jordan and those other guys ironed to a undefeatable unit. And, that analogy is excellent. And so the right counselor at the right time, I think, is valuable. But most people wait far too long. It's just at that point, it's really just of historical interest, and you're better off getting your own individual counseling to help you avoid this pattern in the future. But trying to, figure out who's at fault for what or whatever, that's just a waste of time. And one of the things I see in collaborative practice, I'm a big believer in collaborative and in mediation and for the right people in the right circumstances. And sometimes one of my ground rules in the sessions was always, we're not going to get historical unless it's kind of relevant. It's sometimes a little bit of history is important. And sometimes somebody needs to unwind a little bit about an issue. But once we talk about it once, we don't need to keep going back to the well. And I try to get people back on track and say, look, let's get from A to B, which is getting the divorce done, rather than digging up why we're here in the first place. So it's that important thing about, is this helping us get toward the conclusion? And that's something I use as a lens to look at when I'm giving guidance to a client and when I'm training our lawyers. And I do a lot of lecturing and continuing legal education for attorneys. Are we getting the client more divorced is the lens that I use. Are we getting the person closer to the conclusion, or is the action we're considering just spinning our wheels? So is the motion that we're going to file really just kind of like a poke in the eye to the other person? Is it really going to advance the case, or are we wasting our time? For example, if we're not getting something in discovery, so they're not producing a bank account.
Yeah.
We have the bank account number. They're just, for whatever reason, they're not giving us all the statements. Well, we can either get upset about it and call the lawyer and file a motion and all that stuff. And the motion, I always tell people a motion costs $5,000. It's probably somewhere between 3 and 5 when you're all done. Well, a subpoena costs like $100. So I can just, send a subpoena, get all the bank records, and I don't need to bother with the other lawyer or the other party. Well, why don't we just do that? There are usually multiple ways to the same objective. Let's be efficient. Let's think about a systems approach and get it done efficiently rather than banging our head against the wall and just using court gimmicks because it's cool to file a motion and we want to see the judge again. I'm like, are we doing the client any good with this?
Yeah.
Or are we just kind of showing off like, oh, I know how to write a motion to compel discovery and I want to go and embarrass the other lawyer, whatever. It's like you said, it's taking, we've both said this before, taking the long view and having a big picture approach rather than getting mired in the weeds of a particular thing. Zoom out. Is there a better way to do this? And let's consider that approach. Excuse me, maybe we have no choice. Maybe we have to file a motion because the client or the other party is the one who's solely in control of the information and we can't get it from a third party. Well, okay, then you have no choice. If you ask nicely first and then you go to court if you have to, okay, that makes sense. You don't have any choice. That's easy. Yeah. But the other thing is, we're just wasting our time. We could just go to Chase Bank or we could go to BMO and get the material.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much easier when you spell it out that way. I think so many people get stuck in the same pattern and in the same loop where, well, I'll file a motion because I filed a motion last time, and the time before,
Right.
the case before that, I filed a motion for the same thing, and that's why I'm going to do it. It's like, well, is there another solution that works, that's better, and it doesn't cost
Sure.
as much, and it's faster potentially?
Yeah. And the other thing too that fits in with that point of view is this even worth it? So one great example is in some of these high net worth, high income cases, let's say there's alleged dissipation, which or we call it waste of marital assets, right? Somebody spends money on I'll make it real simple. Somebody spends money on a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever.
Yeah.
If we look at the big picture, if we look at the entire asset picture and we're talking about $100 million in an estate, do we really care that somebody spent 60 grand on trips to Ibiza? I mean, we're going to do all this detective work and screw around with experts and track down, Columbo. It was a detective show years ago when I was a kid in the U.S. Are we going to do our Columbo detective story about this trip? Or are we going to take the long view and say, maybe $50 million is enough for me. I'm not super worried about tracking down this thing. No, depending, maybe there's circumstances where you're using something like that to make a broader point about the other person's credibility or something like that, or if they're concealing it, okay, maybe there's a rationale. But sometimes taking the long view is valuable in other ways. Like, how much money are we talking about in this estate, and things that we can learn easily. So the business valuation, X, Y, and Z, there might be information that's very readily attainable, and we can get most of what we need, or 90% there. Is the 10% really important or not? It might not be. Mm-hmm. And it's important to understand the cost benefit with those things, because sometimes we get 90% of the way done and we're screwing around with the 10%. It takes this inordinate amount of time and money to get that last little gap done. And that's where you think, man, we could have gotten this done 6 months ago, 9 months ago, if we just kind of somebody got reasonable about this one issue. And for some reason, they're just holding on to it,
I think the best example of that was with the Bezos divorce case. And like, I always see Jeff Bezos and Mackenzie Bezos, it always gets thrown out as, he paid too much money, blah, 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 blah. And I know like Mackenzie helped a lot with the business. Like, she kind of started Amazon. She had the idea for it, actually. She was like there day one. But the divorce, I mean, she got $35 billion, right? Billion. And it was done inside of 90 days. Like front to back, done. And I don't think people recognize, because you say 35 billion and people just assume that she got half. She got 25%.
Right.
And there could have been a post-nup. I'm sure there was a post-nup, blah, blah, blah. But she could have argued it. And the payday for arguing it could have been an additional $35 billion. Billion.
Right.
And instead, it was done. Like, they just walked away. They said, we're going to be great friends and have a nice day. That's it. Bye. And it's crazy. I mean, that's a crazy amount of money to pay for anything, for any reason, especially in a divorce case. But, I don't think she got shafted. I don't think Jeff Bezos got shafted. I think they both took the high road and just walked. And that was it. He did something bad and they split.
That's like Bill Gates and Melinda. That, that when you look at the big time, the heavy hitters, it's always under wraps. It's, it's done with a negotiated process.
Yeah.
In California, they have private judges. They might use to. They keep if they have litigated issues, they keep it private, and everything is quiet. You just hear about it when it's finished. And on our podcast, we talk about those cases and try to demystify some of that, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what goes on in these cases. And I remember people saying, for example, that the Costner prenup didn't work. Was the quote. Actually, it worked beautifully.
Yeah.
Worked beautifully. And the litigation was really over child support. Mm-hmm. And because that was the one variable that you can't set in a prenup, was custody and child support. And, rightly, understandably, his ex-wife fought over that issue, trying to maximize her recovery for the kids. And she ended up getting a lot less than she initially wanted. and, rumor had it in the reports we read that Costner gave a little bit more than the fixed sum that was in the prenup to get it over with. But it worked beautifully. Mm-hmm. It took a tremendous amount of wealth off the table, protected the lion's share of his estate. And he learned the hard way. He was divorced in the 90s from his first wife, and she got half. So he was, and his second wife was eyes open coming into that deal. She wasn't naive about it. She knew she had counsel. He did it right. And the prenup was worth every penny he paid for with that. And I just thought it was interesting how the press characterized it as, since they're in court, it didn't work. Well, most prenups get litigated to some extent.
Of course.
Especially when there's a lot of money on the table, somebody's generally going to try to challenge it. And
yeah, that's like saying if you put an airbag in and then you get into a car accident and the airbag works, that's like saying, it goes off. It's like saying it didn't work. Yeah. It's like, right. Well, airbag deployed. Yeah. That's what it was for.
Yes. And so that's a real lesson in the value of prenups. His case is an excellent example of how they work. And just because he ended up in divorce court doesn't mean it failed. It ended up working out very, very well for him ultimately, once you understand what prenups do and what they don't do. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about that too. Mm. So you mentioned postnups too. And I'm seeing those increasingly in, I would say even lower high net worth cases, more commonly than I didn't see one in 10 years. The first 10 years I was practicing. Mm-hmm. And now many more people are asking about them. And we've done some from very large estates. And they serve their purpose well. You have to be careful about disclosures and make sure that it's equitable. The standards are different. Folks, if you're listening, make sure you talk to Ryan or somebody like me about what you need to do and not do, because people misunderstand them. They're not prenups done after you get married. They're kind of a different animal. Mm-hmm. They have similar goals, but they have a higher level of prerequisites and requirements to be enforced. So, but it's a similar concept. Point. Yeah, but disclosure is critical, and then they have to be fair. You have to sort of buy the things you're getting in the postnup with adequate consideration, or the court can invalidate the postnup. So you got to be careful about that. But it's not as easy as just signing a prenup, because it's enough to just get married. That's the only consideration you need. A prenup can be very one-sided in our country, mm-hmm. in the U.S., and it's still binding. So that's an interesting point, though. And then one question I get a lot is, okay, Mr. Wise Guy, about the, I'm paraphrasing, but okay, smart guy, you tell us I need a prenup. Well, how do I broach the topic? Well, I'm not a counselor. I'm an amateur counselor at best. But I will say, I don't have a great answer for that, except sooner is better than later, always. That's a discussion to have around the time you're getting engaged. And if you want a surefire test for your future spouse, see what they say about a prenup early on. That'll tell you exactly where you stand. You might not want to hear the answer, but you're going to find out real fast. Better to find out then than after then you paid for the venue. She bought a dress. You've got the honeymoon all paid for. I'd rather find out what somebody's values are a year before the potential wedding than 2 months before the wedding. Most people do prenups way too late.
Yeah. I would even say too, guys, like if you are a believer in risk mitigation, okay, and you believe that the prenup is the way to go, you've decided that the prenup is the way to go, you have to present it early, and you have to be prepared to end the relationship if she says no.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Those are the terms. And
Which is why people chicken out and they don't do it because they're worried she's going to bail. But then the plus side is you have your answer.
Yeah. And obviously there's going to be some negotiation. There's always been negotiation between reasonable parties, and there's going to be discussion and blah, blah, blah. But if it gets to the point that it's like just a hard no, that's your answer. That's your answer.
Yeah.
Just walk. Because you're going to get divorced anyway. Your chances of divorce down the road will, 10x. You'll be like the Grant Cardone of divorce, and it's going to 10x, and you're going to end up divorced anyway.
Yeah, well, the thing is that it generates the value conversation that people really are kind of shy about. Mm-hmm. And we all hope for the best. We're emotional beings. We hope for the best. We try to not think about the worst. So one of the things I've identified in all the consultations I've done over all these years of doing this is usually a misunderstanding of the social contract. Mainly, nobody talked about it. What were your expectations? Well, I wanted her to do X, Y, and Z. I wanted us to go on vacations and have fun and blah, blah, blah. And I like spending money, blah, 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 blah. And she doesn't like spending money. She doesn't want to go on vacations, or she spends a ton of money, and I hate that. The ones I love are the ones where somebody says they don't want to have children and the other person just like goes right over their head, or they hope that's going to change. And when somebody's already an adult, if somebody's 25, 30 years old and they say they don't want kids, listen to them.
Yeah.
They don't want kids. And, you can have wishful thinking and you can wish all your way into 5, 10 years with a person, and it's time to have kids. And they say, I told you I didn't want kids. Oh, shoot. Now what do we do? So that prenup discussion is really a broader values conversation, and it brings up a values conversation. I think that scares a lot of people. It's why we don't like talking about wills. Nobody likes thinking about dying, so they don't get their estate plan done. It's icky, so we don't like it. Well, it's the same thing with this. Nobody likes having that hard conversation, but it's so critical to have that conversation in a timely manner, and at least you'll have an answer. And like you said, walk, or, at least if you want to stay married, or get married, that's up to you, but at least you know what you're getting into. And I had a client who I said, you need a prenup. We need to work this out. And we worked out a draft, sent it to the guy's counsel. The wife wouldn't agree to critical terms. He agreed to get married anyway. Against my advice, I wrote an email to him saying, don't do this, blah, blah, blah. I can't tell you not to get married, but that's your only option if she won't sign. And he got married anyway. Now, they worked out a postnup, which wasn't as good as the prenup would have been, because now he's in a worse position.
Yeah.
He's already married. She already has rights under the law that she has guaranteed. And now he's got to basically buy the stuff he was going to get for free in the prenup. But that's what he wanted. And hopefully they're still happily married. I don't know.
Best of luck to that.
Nobody keeps up with me on that stuff. I don't know what happened. But so it's so important to have that values conversation. And what is the social, and sometimes, and I say times change, people don't. That's been my experience. Mm-hmm. People usually are who they, if you're marrying somebody who's even a young adult, it's so hard for people to change. What's proof of that? The diet book industry, the fitness industry, now I'm not knocking anybody who's in those industries, but all they tell you is eat less and eat better and work out more. That's it. I just cracked the code for the diet and fitness industry for you folks. And yet, me and you and lots of other people, I bought the 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss. I bought the book about the guy who trained Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
Because humans we're so hard to change. And because of that, don't expect amazing changes from your future spouse. They're telling you who they are. Like, listen to the signals. One of my favorite stories about that, be very brief, was a woman came in to me, talked to me, said, my husband cheated on me. Okay, tell me about it. Tells me the story. So it sounded like a kind of familiar situation, but then she said, well, you know, he cheated on me when we were dating, but I thought, okay, well, you know, once we get engaged, it'll be better. And then I thought he stopped, and then he cheated on me when we were engaged, but I thought when we got married, you know where I'm going with this. And then they got married despite that. And then she thought when they had a baby, he would stop. And of course, after baby number one, he cheated, and she finally said, okay, fool me, whatever it is, 3 times, shame on me. And she got divorced. But that guy was sending signals. You know, this person had a pathology and wasn't the marrying type. So you just have to, it's just interesting. People don't change. And I would say when you have those values discussions, good luck convincing them to change their mind. You're playing the game on hard mode, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I always say I'm not in the convincing business, but I am in the explaining business.
That's good. Yeah, right. I'm in the convincing business and the explaining business.
Well, I mean, that's.
But expand on that. I want to hear what you say. That's interesting.
The reason I make a differentiation between the two is because I don't try to force people into a perspective.
Sure.
And my entire sort of modus operandi even with Stay Rich Divorce, the book, with dealing with people, is I'm more than happy to explain my perspective, and you can take it or you can leave it. And I don't really care. If you ask me for my advice, I will give it to you. If you ignore it, and then this would be, let's say, for a friend, right, who's not paying me. Then they ignore it. Then they come back again and they ask me for advice about the same issue. I'm just going to stop giving advice because clearly you're not listening to it. So I've already explained it. If you wanted to take the advice, you would have taken it.
Right.
Don't ask me for the same advice twice. Right?
Yeah. And
by even just saying that to people, by saying I'm not in the convincing business, I'm in the explaining business, what it does, it's a weird persuasive psychological hook on people because it causes them to drop their defenses and just be a little bit more open to listening because they don't feel like I'm trying to fight their idea. Hey, I'm just going to explain my perspective. You take with it what you want.
Yeah.
Take whatever you want out of it. And they go, oh, okay, cool. Right? And it just drops their levels a little bit. So we're not in a fight anymore. We're not trying to convince each other. We're just going to explain each other's perspective and see some sort of humanity there. You know what I mean?
That's valuable. And one of the things I say to lawyers, and I learned along the way in my career, was a willingness to listen to the other guy. And, you know, when you start out in this game, I talk about this a little bit in the book about how law school is all about combat. I mean, law school teaches you trial practice, essentially. Mm-hmm. And it's built all around, in the United States, it's all around the case system. And you learn from cases and statutes, and it's all built around trial practice. And they have like 1 or 2 classes on alternative dispute resolution, which is funny because so much is done through ADR these days in various flavors: arbitration, mediation, collaborative, and straight up negotiation in a litigated case. You know, the 95% of divorce cases settle at some point. The question is when. Is it going to be 3 months from now, or is it going to be the day of trial or halfway through trial? It's, you know, but most of them settle. So I learned along the way, you know, initially you like, I'm going to build my view of this case and I'm just going to fight. And then along the way you learn maybe that's not the most efficient thing. Maybe the other lawyer knows something I don't. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's something. And so after a little while, if you get beat up a couple times, you learn, you know, I'm not going to close my mind to their perspective. So I've often had this conversation with another attorney because I think they don't expect an open mind from the other lawyer. But I'll say something like, if they're all hyped up and angry, I'll say, hey, wait a second. If you have a case or a statute that I should consider, I don't claim to know everything. Maybe there's a legal argument I don't know about. Educate me on it. There might be some facts I don't know because my client's not telling me the whole story. So please just let me know and I'll get on the phone with you and I'll listen. You know, I'm not going to be a wall. I'll absorb everything you have to say without judgment. And it might be something that shifts my mindset. And I think a professional needs to have that, like you said, an open mind and understand all may not be as it appears. So listening not only to your client's perspective, but understanding that they say like there's your client's story, there's the other client's story, and the truth.
Yeah.
There's three different stories because we all have perspective. And so it can be so valuable to hear from the other lawyer and actually pick up the phone and have a conversation, which is like this novel idea these days. For some reason, we get into these keyboard battles where we're just banging emails back and forth. It's like, how about we pick up the phone and actually talk to the other side? And it's like the hotline between the U.S. and Russia. You know, before we shoot off nuclear weapons, let's have a phone call and say, do we understand each other? Maybe there's misunderstanding. Well, I'd like to know what the other guy has to say. Maybe there's something I don't know about my client that's important. And so that's valuable to have that open mind and be an honest broker and still be a good advocate for your client. And maintaining objectivity is huge. I always make it analogous to being a doctor. A good doctor doesn't wear their client's problems. And a good doctor isn't a cheerleader for the client. A good doctor is an objective guide. And you have to be realistic and look at all the information, give it your best assessment. You want to have good bedside manner, but you want to give people objectively the best advice. And you can't just be, I always tell people when you're looking for lawyers, avoid a cheerleader or a yes man, they'll just tell you what you want to hear. That's ultimately makes you feel good in the short run, but gives you poor guidance in the long run. And I've had clients mad at me in the past because it's exactly what you said. I'm giving you the advice. You don't have to follow it. I'm like, you pay me for my time. I appreciate it. And my advice and my experience, I'll give it. You don't have to follow it. But it's critical that we stay objective and open-minded to the possibilities. So we give people our best guidance and that they're best informed they can be and not just be one-sided cheerleaders for our clients that just kind of, we're like knights at jousting, for no reason. We're just going to charge at each other.
Mercenary. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I'm not going to do that. I take this career too seriously. I believe in lawyering. I've always enjoyed being a lawyer, and it's a privilege. And I want people to think well of me in the long run, whether it's my clients, judges, lawyers. You build that reputation over many years. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to lose it. It's too easy to lose it. I'm not going to do it. So it's that's what's kind of guided me and our firm through the years is let's try to do it a little bit better and do the right thing. I don't like doing otherwise. I don't feel good about it.
I agree 100%. Only 100%.
Maybe it sounds obvious, but unfortunately, I don't think it's that obvious these days, or it's not what's happening necessarily out there all the time.
It's not. And unfortunately, for a bunch of reasons, I'm sure there are many, the divorce industry has a lot of idiosyncrasies that cause really bad outcomes for everybody. And, if there's one takeaway from our show today, it's obtain great counsel. It's be open-minded to the process and going through it and not being a jerk, not shooting yourself in the foot, and being willing sometimes to just pay for your freedom and realize that having to pay today, it's a much smaller penalty when compared to your attention, the quality of your time, the quality of your energy, and probably money if you just kick it down the road and create more issues later. And, hire somebody, hire Rafe. I mean, hire Rafe or find somebody in your jurisdiction that exhibits these similar qualities, like this willingness to look 360 and from an eagle eye and go, what's best here? Like, what's the real best thing that we can do? What's our next best step? And so many people miss that today, unfortunately.
That's true. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for coming. And everybody, please go and buy Rafe's book. It is fantastic. I just want this done. Available on Amazon. And you have, there we go. And you have a second one coming out in the near future.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get it out in January. It's called I Just Want to Know How Smart, Successful People Decide on Divorce Without Fear, Uncertainty, and Doubt. And that's almost done.
Beautiful. So
thank you.
Buy the first one now. You have time to get it into your house, read it, and digest it. And then come January, you'll know whether or not you want to pull the plug in the first place. Because you can buy a second book and read that one, and then you'll be fully prepared. You got a prequel, you got the sequel, and everything else going on. And of course, reach out to Rafe Palmer with any follow-ups or questions, or to engage his services. I'll be sure to put his various social media tags and @ and emails and websites and everything like that in the description as well. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Raiford. This conversation has been really enlightening, and I know that our viewers will get so much value from it. So thank you again.
It's my pleasure, Ryan. Thanks very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for watching the Stay Rich podcast. Tune in next time for another brilliant, articulate, smart, thoughtful, and insightful guest. And we will see you there, and stay rich in the meantime.